Hey everyone, wherever you are, I hope you're having a wonderful week so far. We're here with the latest episode of the Inside Crypto Show, interviews and discussions with regular people just like yourselves. Today we're joined by Zechariah Zheng. Associated with eToro, he's a crypto expert on a mission to transform the cryptocurrency landscape. His journey in the cryptocurrency realm is one of determination and commitment to making crypto more accessible, transparent, and trustworthy for everyone. Before we dive into it, Zechariah, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me on the show. I've been listening for a little bit and it's been fun. I'm on eToro and I'm one of the most copied traders on the platform, so six in the wall. I have about 11,000 copiers and about 17 million of management right now. So doing pretty well for myself. I really love cryptocurrency. I have been involved in the space since 2015. I keep a USB, like a small thumbstick of mining Bitcoin on a thumbstick, right? So that's a relic right now. But it's funny that I still have it. I show it off sometimes when I go for conferences. But somehow didn't manage to make a lot of money since then. But I really love the space. I love what it stands for. I love decentralization, and I also code as well. So really love cryptocurrency and the space all around it.
Okay, very interesting. For those who are not aware, right, who maybe have not used eToro or other apps or applications or companies, right, what is copy trading?
Great question. So copy trading is a lot like fund management, but what happens is that it allows you don't have to have a lot of money to invest on eToro. You can do it for as little as $500 and you can just copy anyone. And what happens when you do copy trading is you will copy the exact same trades that I make. For instance, if I did a trade on BTC this week and I opened it on Monday at, I don't know, for example, $20,000, you would open the exact same trade as me. And if I use 1% of my account, and you would also open it with 1% of your account. So that's how copy trading works. It's a very intuitive thing. It's very simple. Allows anybody really to get into getting your funds looked after by somebody. And it's really such a brilliant product. I've been with the company for about 7 years now, so just as a popular investor. And that's what we call ourselves, like people who manage money, just popular investors.
Nice. And if you're watching this on the YouTube video, right, I would encourage you to go check Zach's LinkedIn profile. He has a video there about popular investors and you can get a better idea of what that's about. That's a really cool, well done video. And I just started using eToro, I think last year. Again, this is not sponsored or anything from my part. It's just here in Taiwan, it's such a huge, complicated process. And especially you have an inzang or a stamp here in Taiwan that you have to stamp everything to do a transaction. I remember going to my broker and filling out 17 pages of paperwork to open up a trading account, and eToro was far simpler. But let's continue on this sort of discussion of eToro, right? One of the things I was always confused about with copy trading and eToro and other similar apps, right? So even if you're not an eToro user, is okay, I'm a middle class worker, I'm making 3,000 Singapore dollars a month or 2,000 US dollars a month, and you're trading 20, 30, 50, 100K on a single trade. Is how do I copy you when I don't have enough money?
So this is actually one of the most innovative things about copy trading. It's that you can do it with any amount of money. Like I said, as little as $500, you can just do it. And what happens is, because it's not a fund, we're not a fund itself. You don't put money into a fund and take it out and all that. The money stays just in the brokerage, and we only invest in certain liquid stocks or more liquid stocks. So when I open a trade, it can't be some run-in-the-mill US mini cap or something like that. It has to be a decent size. So that way you can also open the trades on your account as well. So it's really just a simple system. If anybody has access to it, and that's the fascinating thing about eToro. I think the story that I tell is when my dad actually passed away, I tried to get advice on financial management. And I learned that if you're a high net worth individual, the access that you have to different financial products is different as a retail investor, as a regular person, right? And eToro really brings those barriers down. It's really about democratizing and optimizing how we trade and how we manage money. And I love it. I think it's such a fantastic product, and that's why I stick with them. I've done very well for myself, but at the same time, it's been a few years. There's certain years I've done this where I actually haven't gotten paid at all. But because it's such a great product, I really just stuck with it. And I really believe that this might be the future of finance and the way that retail investors or not high net worth individuals manage their money.
Nice. And I totally agree with you, Zach. So coming back to trading, right? And looking at like platforms like Reddit, I've seen this like the last year or 2 years or so. People like, okay, I want to be a day trader. I want to be a this trader. Should I copy trade? How do I start? What is the best advice? And people doing like crazy things. I took out a $20,000 loan from Bank of America. I'm going to be a day trader, or I quit my job and I'd be a day trader. Like, how did you start trading? Is it a natural instinct, or you just like super smart? What's the deal?
So when I started trading, it was really because of technical college. So I was studying my diploma in banking finance. So there was this trading competition. So I just joined it. No idea what I was doing. So it was just random buy, sell. And yeah, I've got my ass handed to me by the market so many times. I lost my first account, just completely blew it up. And that's just part of the learning journey that happens. And it's not a fun journey, but it's part of it. But yeah, starting trading is always very difficult. Emotions are very difficult. Learning to manage trades, what you're looking out for, that can be difficult. And one of the more interesting things that I've actually tried in blockchain is verify. Everyone makes it seem so easy, especially on social media, right? Social media, everyone's making big bucks, and they're like, just all you need to do is just study this chart, this pattern, and whatever nonsense have you, right? I actually built a product on blockchain using IPFS that I asked financial influencers, can you verify your results? Because the blockchain is immutable, right? So once the results are published, you can't change it. So I asked them, and this is open source on my website, by the way. And yeah, I asked people to verify their results, and I approached 200 different investors, and only one person replied me. And these are like really high profile guys, right? One person replied me, and he said he wanted to get paid if he was to do this. So I'm like, yeah, it's really hard to day trade, and don't believe everything on social media. That's like the number one piece of advice. It's hard. It's very hard.
Okay. Tell us about your website and the product, if you're able to. Like, where can people go to find you? Because I have your LinkedIn already, but what is
so my website is a bit tongue-in-cheek, so it's notadvice.financial.
That is awesome. I love that name.
I know, right? I had such a good laugh when I got the domain. It was fantastic. Yeah.
Okay. So when people go there, what should they be expected?
They just can find details about what I do on eToro. So that's mainly what I focus on. But this project that I did for fun, it's open source. So if you go to the right-hand corner, there's a verify me, and leads to a GitHub, and I tell people exactly how to do it. I put out a few Python contracts. So if anyone wants to copy it, please go ahead. Just try and verify people on Instagram. I think that would be fantastic. But I really did it for fun and didn't go anywhere, but it was fun doing it.
Of course, that's the whole point of everything, is to have fun and enjoy yourself. eToro is not just for crypto, it's not just for traditional stocks, right? And you being a day trader, right? We had the head of ByteTree Asset Management on earlier this year, and his suggestion was 70-20-10 was 70% stocks, 20% gold, 10% crypto. For this, whatever you want to call it, ratio, right? What's your feeling being the experience that you have?
So the way that I structured it, just for all, when people ask me this question, it's come up quite a bit. I asked them to divide their portfolio into two baskets, a low risk basket and a high risk basket. So everything I do on eToro is I consider high risk. So I'm willing to lose about 30%. And that is when my stop loss will hit in and we walk away. So 30% is maximum loss. How much can you take? So for me personally, it's 50% of my portfolio is in there. So I'm willing to lose 30% of that. So 15% of my total portfolio. And in the high risk basket. And the other 50% is in bonds. That's it. That is it. I don't complicate it. It's super simple and it's easy. Anybody can just do it. Because people like to allocate this, that, the other. It's very complicated. But if you think about it, it's like how much maximum downside I can take. It becomes so much simpler and easier for you to get on with your day. One of the things I do love about eToro as well is I do know that a lot of developers, especially in crypto, they spend so much time looking at the market and not actually coding stuff. It's such a brain drain. Build stuff, man. He's so good at building stuff. Like, don't look at the market. It's like, why are you looking at the market? It's like, I want to catch this tick or whatever have you, and it's too much, man. Yeah, I think everybody should do what they're really good at and just enjoy that. Why are you focusing on something that stresses you out and you don't enjoy it? It's just because like FOMO or whatever, right?
That's very good advice. You come from I could say, somewhat traditional finance background. What made you decide, okay, like you sound very passionate about blockchain and distributed ledger and digital assets, whatever you want to call it, right? So what was that memory going back, way back in the day to say, hey, this is interesting, I've got to give it a go?
Great question. This is fantastic. Like even till today, like people, when anyone like asks me, why do you love blockchain so much? I can answer it like really simply. It's such an efficient technology. It blows my mind that till today, the most secure way of us transacting money on the internet is a 16-digit card number and a CCV in an app. Like, it's just such an inefficient method of transacting. And even then, they charge you like 3%, right? Blockchain, if you do it, especially like private blockchains, is so much more efficient, and EVMs are so easy to build on. This is definitely going to take over the world. It's just a matter of when. So to me, blockchain is just a better technology. Like, why wouldn't you use it?
I totally agree with you. But then let's come back to the Binance thing that
Yes.
happened this week. The FTX last year, Three Arrows Capital. It's happening, and we're seeing more institutional adoption. We're seeing potential products on different stock markets around the world. But is retail actually going to eventually come into blockchain in a big way? Because I still, as much as people can see the Genesis little poster over there behind me, and crypto mining poster, which is how I started mining crypto, and I'm a big believer in it, but I don't think this is going to happen for another decade, and this might be pessimistic for myself, but what do you think, Zach? Is retail going to come in ever?
Mhm.
Is it going to be sooner or later?
So another great question. It's unfortunately blockchain is difficult. Like when we started like mining, it's not easy to set up. Like, that stuff is not fun. Yeah, it's gotten better, that's for sure, but it is difficult and unfortunately involves one of the most sensitive things in the world, which is money. And of course, anti-money laundering and stuff like that. It's reality that blockchain is used for stuff like that. So the question is, how do we build like structures around that to make that safer, to make it less... No one wants to fund terrorism. I don't think that's even a question. Nobody wants to do it. But does it happen through crypto? Obviously it does. Of course, chain analysis and people like that have done a great job building like different products to, okay, how do you detect whether these have gone through strange places? And those things help. But will retail come into it eventually? I'm sure it will. But what's the easiest way of doing it? Who's going to do it the best? That's the question. I think PayPal has done an excellent job, like with PYUSD and their wallets right now, and bringing just users on board. I think that's fantastic. Will we come up with more decentralized methods of doing it? I think it's ERC's 4.33.7 or whatever have you. That's such an interesting architecture to allow people to come into crypto with a little bit more decentralization. So things like that are slowly being built. Will retail come into it? I do believe they will. Will it be in the form of CBDCs? Unfortunately, I think it will as well. Not unfortunately, I think it will. But and that's not a bad thing to me. It's still more efficient.
Yeah, no, I agree with you as well, Zach. We
Yep.
talked about this before, so I thought you were going to be in Australia today,
Yeah.
but you're in Singapore. And we had the founder of Blue Jay Finance on, also from Singapore, or living in Singapore
Yes.
at the moment. And she had a lot of good things to say about Singapore as far as the law and crypto regulation clarity. And this goes back
Yeah.
into our intro of transparency in cryptocurrency. And Singapore seems to be leading
Yeah,
the way
yeah.
in Asia, at least even outpacing Hong Kong and Taiwan and other jurisdictions, right? And even Japan, I would say, in a way. So do you think that's going to play a role in adoption in Asia? Is Singapore going to be the hub for Asian countries as far as crypto adoption goes?
Great question. Answer is I don't know, man. That's really hard because we do have a better, I think, clarity on a lot of things. But in terms of innovation, there's like really innovative stuff come out of Singapore. Like I haven't seen that much recently, so it's a bit hard for me to say. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Yeah, I don't know. That's really hard.
No worries. Okay, then where do you see the innovation coming from the short term?
I think in short term, and definitely in terms of like funding, it's still the West. The funding is still the best in the West. The innovation and the things that people are willing to try, I think is still much higher. The tolerance is much higher in the West. So I still think it's going to come out of that for the time being. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, no, I think some people would agree with you, especially with people we've talked to on the podcast. I think we've had disagreements about, it's going to be the Middle East, it's going to be Asia, but the majority of guests in 170 episodes have been like, it's still going to be America, it's still going to be like Western countries, and so it's a good variety of people. So let's keep on this topic of transparency, right? And that's something you believe in. And We talked about how the blockchain is immutable. Like what's there is there, you can't change it. And while we have these aspects like immutability, like you can go to Dune Analytics and other crypto platforms to say, this is what's happening on the blockchain. I can see it, you can see it in Singapore, my friend in Massachusetts can see it in America. Is this enough in terms of transparency? Is crypto accessible enough going into 2024, or do we need to do more?
It's definitely something that, like, if you're just doing like simple funds transfers, I think we've done a fantastic job. If you're talking about like NFTs and just owning like certain assets, I think we've done a fantastic job. And those things are already built and are interesting. But can we do better or like more things with it? I don't know at the moment. Like Lightning Network is fantastic. I think Lightning Network allows the increase of transactions. But until everything closes, you can't really see what's going on, right? Is it enough? There can always be more. There's always more.
Let's zoom out and talk about the markets. So we had really good news in terms of what's happening in the US and even overall as well around the world. So the markets have been pretty stable, and even with Binance, CZ resigning and Binance getting that huge $1 billion fine, the markets absorbed it and the crypto is still stable. It hasn't been the same. I remember I was editing another podcast. We did a podcast on the 21 Shares YouTube channel with ARK, and one of our analysts was like, yeah, it's not as bad as 2022 November with terms of outflows from Binance. What's your outlook as we end off 2023 into 2024? How are you feeling about the crypto markets and maybe the overall economic markets in the world?
Great question. I unfortunately do not have a good view on the regular markets. I have a good view on crypto. I do think crypto is going to do like pretty decently towards the end of the year, especially with all the ETF approvals. I think it's a liquidity question really, because if you think about all the ETFs just being approved at the same time, right? Where are they going to get this Bitcoin? Bitcoin is not the most liquid asset in the world. If you want to get that much Bitcoin into each ETF, it's going to be hard. You can't do it through the open market, otherwise the price is going to go up. And I think that has to happen to some degree. So I am positive on the price of Bitcoin, especially the ETFs coming up. So I'm positive on that. In terms of traditional markets, and this is again where most of my portfolio is focused on, it's interesting to me that the S&P is up like 19% this year. And if you think about what has changed in the last year, interest rates are like really high. They're still really high. The economic outlook is not good, and the markets are up. Like, why? It's perplexing to me, and the traditional finance answer is going to be spread compressions and there's no alternatives and things like that. But it is very scary because it's not backed by fundamentals, you're not backed by growth and things like that. So it's going to be an interesting one. I do think people are mispricing that there's a potential recession, especially in traditional markets. And I would be very cautious about how you invest in really high valuation stocks like the Mag 7. Those tend to be a little bit out there, like really out there actually. So yeah, I would just be a bit more cautious in the way you invest, like going to the next few quarters, and just be mindful that there may be a recession.
And like you traveling around, and you were just in Oz, you're back to Singapore. What's the feeling there? I know my partner talks about 通膨 or like inflation in Chinese all the time, and it's like prices here. When I talk about it on the podcast, people are like, that's cheaper. I'm like, but it's expensive for the average Taiwanese person, because minimum wage here is just roughly around $1,000, whereas prices going up about a few cents here or US cents in Taiwan may sound like, oh, that's nothing compared to what prices have gone up in the States. I'm like, but it's a lot here. What's the feeling from people you've talked to in Singapore and feeling you've talked to from people in Australia? How are they feeling about the overall markets and the economies in their respective countries? Are they like you? Are they a bit cautious about next year, or they're positive?
In terms of like their feelings about the markets, I don't think they're that concerned. They generally, I think we've come to the general feeling I get from investors is that we've been in the market that's just been going in one direction. It can't come down, basically. So that's the case for the last 20 years, right? So they still think the market's going to go up. But do they feel the pinch of higher interest rates? Definitely. There's zero question about that. The average household balance sheet is strong and can take the hit of higher interest rates, but it does hurt their like spending power. So if you look at like different banks around the world, and this is like public information, right? Like you can see the default rates have not been, especially in Australia, have not gone up dramatically, even with interest rates being as high as they are. But so the household balance sheet seems strong, but people are sacrificing. I'm not going to eat out as much because I have to pay my mortgage. That's definitely going to happen. But it is typical of markets to be a little bit complacent. Things are always going to go up. But I always retort that, and people don't cancel me because of this. But if you look at like Japan, I ask this question a lot. If you think about Japan, if you bought at the peak of 1997, like the stock market, the peak of 1997, guess how long it would take for you to recover your money? Yeah. Can just give a guess. 5 years?
5 years?
In the US, it's typically like 3 or 4 years you get back to all-time highs. Yeah. For the Japanese stock market, till today, you would not have made your money back. Yeah.
Really? Oh, that's because they had that like record like deflation, right? For how many
They had
decades.
a huge bubble, and it's huge. Like it's massive. The stock, but that's the reality of stock market. Certain aspects can play into it, such that it's very hard to make your money back. And I think in the US, people have this US stock market centric focus, and they think that the market's always going to. The reality is that's just not the case. We can go sideways for very many years, and that's just reality. It's just how do you navigate it and how do you manage your risk in between, and that's something that's very difficult. And I just need people to be a little bit more cautious. And some people are just like, I'm just going to buy passive ETFs and just hope for the best in 20 years. And you may not make money, and that's the reality. I really hope you do, but markets can be strange. Markets can be very strange. Active management, I think, is going to be a bit more superior in terms of managing that. But we'll see. It's going to be an interesting ride.
And I definitely agree with you. That's something on my to-do list, is to move from being like a passive management person to something more active, because it's been on my to-do list and hopefully I'll get it done in 2024. Talking about market events, you mentioned to be cautious, and I saw something on CNN today. They're talking about the big 5 Chinese real estate companies and the risk entailed thereforth. And before my current job, I used to work for a architecture company here in Taiwan, which was doing business in China. And they were talking about some of the impacts there with my former boss. And some people have said this is not going to have an impact on the global economy. Lots of media outlets have said, yes, this is going to have a huge impact when we talk about Evergrande and Country Garden and other companies who are not just in China as well. I remember they had done developments in Malaysia, in Singapore as well. What's your take on the Chinese impact of 2024's economy?
This is another great question, by the way. Fantastic question. Is there an impact? There's definitely an impact. You're talking about like property, and it's one of the biggest drivers of GDP in China. So there is an impact. Zero question about it. So the next question is how much? Or what kind of magnitude should we expect? I did a presentation recently, and I said PE ratios, which is a metric that we use to measure the value of a company, right? So price divided by earnings. The lower the number, the better. And it shows the number is slightly higher in developing economies because you expect a slightly riskier and more growth and things like that. So I showed the chart, and I said that, look, for the S&P 500, the average PE is about 22.5 or something like that. And the Max 7, which is like your Teslas, your Apples, your Amazons and things like that, is 75. So much higher, 75. If 22 is for the S&P 500 and 75 is for the Max 7, where should China be? Should China be like slightly cheaper because you're expecting it to be a bit more risky, so you want a bit more value in it? So slightly cheaper, maybe 20, 16, 17, 15 maybe, something like that. Currently, it's trading at 12. Wow. So when you think about like the way that people have taken, like media tends to paint it like either positive or negative. It's very extreme, right? Yes, it's bad, but how bad do you expect it to be? Is it going to be that bad, like super awful, like fear-mongering, and that's how they get clicks and stuff? So they tend to paint a very bad picture. But if you look at China, it's so cheap right now. There are 2 bets that I have in my portfolio, and everyone, this is not financial advice. Please do your own research and all that. Don't get Kieran and I in trouble.
Yes.
I own 2 stocks. One is 0386, which is Sinopec. It's a Chinese oil company owned by the government. And 3323, which is China Construction, also owned by the government. So these are 2 companies that, again, government owned, so they are less risky on the curve. If you buy it and do nothing, right, it still gives you an 8% dividend yield. Like, where on earth do you get these kind of opportunities? It's because everyone's so negative about China. These opportunities exist. And I've loaded up on those 2 and done horribly, by the way. I think I'm like down 20-30%. But I don't really care too much because it's still giving me a great dividend. Like, why would I care too much about it? Yeah, I think people tend to take things in the extreme. And finding value is when you don't take things to the extreme and find it in between. You know the answer.
That is really good advice. That's going to be my first YouTube show for next week.
Yeah.
Zach, We've talked about so much, and I love the pace of today's podcast. Fast, awesome, quick, insightful answers. For the viewers, for the listeners, right, who made it this far on the podcast, what do you want them to do, right? So after listening to you and watching you, do you want them to go check out your website? Do you want them to check out your eToro profile? What do you want them to do?
Yeah, if you want to find out more about me, I think the best place to find me is on eToro. So eToro, under Fund Manager Zach, that's my username. You can see my returns over the last 7 years. You can see how I manage my portfolio. I'm very transparent about the way I trade. And by the way, I can't lie to you about my performance because it's all tracked by eToro. So if I lose 40%, you will see I lose 40%. But I'm very lucky it hasn't happened yet. But yeah, so check out my eToro page. And yeah, if you're interested in what I do, feel free to copy me. I'm also very responsive on walls. So if you have a question or anything like that, just message me on eToro and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. I hope I can provide a service to people, like really just high level of looking to markets. I love the market, so I really want to help people like manage their money and not feel stressed about it and have all these anxieties about it. So that's really my passion in life and what I'm aiming to do. Like really, democratize finance in such an interesting way.
And that is awesome. That's what people need, because as much as like I'm turning 41 next month, and like my generation, we're like, okay, this is money. Good luck. And there was not a lot of education in school about like bonds and ETFs and all the financial instruments that we have today and what you should do and portfolio diversification and sort of stuff. The internet needs people like you, and that's the awesome part, is like you could be anywhere in the world and you could still be helping people learn and give advice, and again, not financial advice, just advice that you have to still do your own research for. Zach, it's been awesome so far. I was wondering as well, you're on this podcast today, right? And I know a question I get almost is like all the time is like, oh my God, we love X guest because he was fun and entertaining. I'd love to watch him more on YouTube or TikTok or other places like that. Are you doing regular videos somewhere, or is it just people have to look out for you on different podcasts?
I do have a YouTube channel. I will say this. I have a YouTube channel and I give quarterly updates to my investors about what I do. But not as candid as this. Like, this is very candid. And you have to tune into more of your podcast to find me.
Okay. Then I will keep that in mind. And I know I get the same question all the time from different people, and I'm really tired of answering it. So I know, because people just love meeting you guys and all the different guests that we've had. So it's been awesome. Zach, thank you so much for making time in the afternoon. I really appreciate it. Before we end up today's show, as usual with this podcast, is there anything you want to plug? You've talked about your eToro profile. You've talked about your website and some of the code you've written there before. Anything you want to plug? Any last words of advice? Anything you want to share with us before we end up today's show?
I will have two last pieces of advice. One, Kieran, you look very good for 41, by the way.
Thank you.
Second is I would be very cautious of any advice you get on the internet, especially if people are not transparent with you. And I think that's the cause of a lot of anxiety. And I don't like seeing that. I think it's terrible, especially people posting their Lambos and things like that. It's just awful. It's hard, and I know it's difficult and looks really demystifying. And why am I not that level? This guy's obviously not as smart as me. But yeah, I just want people to relax. It's hard. It's hard for everybody. Like, maybe this person is lying to you. Maybe he's an outlier because he got really lucky. All this can happen, and that's life, unfortunately. So yeah, just take it easy and take a breath. It's okay. It's gonna be okay.
I love that advice, because honestly, I think we've had a few guests mention this, but we haven't had one in a while, that it's not as glory and famous and all that stuff you might see on Twitter or YouTube, and like you said, Lambo pictures on Instagram, and it is difficult. It's not easy. And I started with, I remember sleeping on a mattress in America, studying in America back in the day, and not having a bed or a desk or anything like that. And I'm not like I've done amazingly for myself, but you'll get there. No matter who you are, you just have to take everything into perspective, and like you said, take a deep breath. Zach, thank you so much for your time. It has been awesome. So I have your LinkedIn profile that will be down in the podcast show notes and the YouTube show notes as well for people who would like to follow you. Is there anywhere else that you'd like to direct people to? I'll put the eToro profile as well. Yes, I'll put that in there. Anywhere beyond that.
No, I think that's it. You can find more of me on my website as well, but I don't post a lot. But yeah, that's you can do that as well. Okay.
Cool. Website, LinkedIn, eToro profile, I include all those three. Follow Zach, listen to what he says. Check out the wall stuff in eToro is really a good place to have a look. I've looked at that as well. I haven't gotten into copy trading just yet, but it's just too many things going on in life these days. That's also on the 24 list of things to do. But yeah, Zechariah, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you making time today. I know you're super busy from looking at your social media and stuff. Thank you again, and hopefully we'll catch up in person if you're ever in Taiwan or sometime in Singapore.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Kieran. Appreciate it.